Welcome back to the deep dive. It is Monday, January 19, 2026. And, if you are checking your calendar or maybe you're just enjoying a second cup of coffee on a day off, you know exactly what today is. It's Martin Luther King Jr. Day.
It is indeed. And, usually when this day rolls around, the algorithm kind of serves you the same things, right? You get the I Have a Dream clips, the black and white photos, the standard retrospectives.
The greatest hits.
The greatest hits, exactly. And don't get me wrong, those are vital. I mean, they're the foundation of everything. But today, we're going to do something a little different.
We are. We're going to look at the day itself, not just a biography of the man, but the actual machinery of the holiday. Because when you really, really dig into the sources, and we have a massive stack of them today, you realize this day wasn't just, handed to us on a platter. It was a brawl.
It was a massive, decades-long legislative struggle. And what's so fascinating is that the struggle hasn't really stopped. It's changed its shape.
Right. So that's our mission for this deep dive. We're going to start by looking at how this holiday was fought for in the trenches of Congress. Then we're going to jump to today, to 2026, and see how it's being used literally today as a political football between, say, California and the federal government.
And then, and this is the part I'm most excited about, we're going to go really, really local.
To the ground level.
Exactly. We want to connect the high-level philosophy of a federal holiday with the ground-level mechanics of running a city. Because when you peel back the layers of the sources we've got today, from legislative archives to local newspapers in Antioch, California, you realize that community isn't just a buzzword on a banner.
It's a line item in a budget.
It's a line item in a budget. It's a debate over staffing. It's about whether you have the actual cash on hand to keep people warm when the temperature drops below freezing.
Precisely. So before we get to the budget spreadsheets, which, believe it or not, are actually fascinating, we have to start with the origin story. Because, and I think a lot of people have a sort of collective amnesia about this, MLK Day wasn't an immediate, obvious reaction to the civil rights movement.
Far from it. It took 15 years of what you could only call legislative warfare to get it done.
So let's unpack that. The timeline itself is pretty shocking. Dr. King is assassinated in Memphis. It's April 4th, 1968. How long until someone in the government actually tries to formally recognize him?
4 days.
4 days, not 4 months or 4 years.
4 days. It's almost unbelievable. Representative John Conyers, Jr., a Democrat from Michigan, an African-American congressman from Detroit, introduced the very first piece of legislation to make King's birthday a federal holiday just 4 days after the assassination.
Wow. I mean, the country's still reeling. Cities are literally burning with grief and rage. And Conyers has the presence of mind to put a bill on the table.
It was an incredibly bold move. But you're right, it was also a massive uphill battle, given the political temperature of the country in 1968.
So it didn't pass.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Not even close at first. But Conyers was just relentless.
Yeah.
This is the key part of the story. He didn't just introduce it once and give up. He reintroduced that bill every single year. For 15 years, it became his personal crusade.
15 years. And it wasn't a smooth ride, I take it. I was looking at the notes on the 1979 vote. This is more than a decade after King's death. They finally get it to a vote in the House of Representatives, and what happens?
It fails.
Yeah.
And it fails by a heartbreakingly small margin, just 5 votes.
5 votes. Can you imagine being John Conyers or a member of his staff working on this for a decade, getting it that close, and losing by 5 votes?
It must have been staggering. And the arguments against it, they tell you a lot about the era. I mean, you had the fiscal conservatives, of course, arguing about the cost.
That's the standard playbook, right? We can't afford it.
It is. The argument is that a paid federal holiday is expensive. You're talking lost productivity, overtime pay for essential federal workers who still have to show up. It's a tangible economic hit.
But there was another argument, a more, let's say, philosophical one, the tradition argument.
Right. This was a big one. The opposition pointed out that at the time, only 2 individuals had federal holidays named specifically for them, George Washington and Christopher Columbus.
So the argument was that honoring a private citizen, someone who never held public office, never was a president or a general, was unprecedented.
Exactly. They framed it as a slippery slope. If we honor Dr. King, who's next? It was a way to frame the opposition in terms of precedent and tradition rather than, the more uncomfortable reasons some might have had.
Which feels like a convenient technicality to hide behind, honestly. We can't honor a Nobel Peace Prize winner and civil rights leader because he wasn't a general.
It does. But for a long time, that argument held sway. The bill was stalled, and then the tide starts to turn. And this is where it gets really interesting, because the deadlock isn't broken by a politician. It's broken by pop culture.
You cannot tell the story of MLK Day without talking about Stevie Wonder.
Absolutely not. The song.
Happy Birthday.
Yes. In 1980, Stevie Wonder releases the album Hotter Than July, and on it is the song Happy Birthday. And for a lot of us today, that's just a great song you hear at a birthday party. It's upbeat, it's fun. But it was not written to be a party song. It was explicitly written and released as a political tool.
It was basically a protest song you could dance to.
A protest song you could dance to?
Yeah.
It was, in some ways, a diss track. If you actually listen to the lyrics, he's challenging the people who are blocking the holiday. I just never understood how a man who died for good could not have a day that would be set aside for his recognition. He's calling them out directly.
And it wasn't just the song. He's his platform.
Oh, completely. He went on tour with Gil Scott-Heron to promote the cause. He held rallies. The song became a campaign anthem. It galvanized the public in a way that, C-SPAN coverage of congressional hearings just couldn't.
And it worked. It wasn't just the song. It became a movement.
It worked incredibly well. The King Center, led by Coretta Scott King, partnered with Stevie Wonder's advocacy, and together they launched a massive petition drive. They collected 6 million signatures.
6 million.
6 million signatures on a petition to Congress. And at the time, that was described as the largest petition in favor of an issue in United States history.
That is a number that is very hard for Congress to ignore. You can ignore a bill languishing in committee, but you can't ignore 6 million voters.
Exactly. The political calculus starts to shift. The public is now mobilized, so the pressure is mounting. We get to 1983. The House, with this new public momentum, finally passes it with a huge veto-proof majority. Now it goes to the Senate.
And this is where the drama really, really peaks. This is where we meet the final boss of the opposition, Senator Jesse Helms.
Senator Jesse Helms of North Carolina. A staunch conservative and a master of parliamentary procedure. And he didn't just plan to vote no. He went on the offensive.
He launched a filibuster, right?
He did. And it wasn't just about delaying the vote. He tried to assassinate King's character, posthumously, on the floor of the United States Senate. He submitted a 300-page document to the Senate.
300 pages. What was in it?
It was a compilation of allegations, largely drawn from old FBI files, suggesting that Dr. King had ties to the Communist Party. He called King's philosophy action-oriented Marxism.
And this is 1983. The Cold War is still very much a thing, calling someone...
It's such a powerful moment. Moynihan, who was a Democrat but also, very sharp anti-communist himself, was just disgusted. He gets a copy of this 300-page binder of accusations from Helms. He takes it, walks to the front of the chamber.
And he doesn't just refute it.
No. He calls it a packet of filth. Then he throws it onto the Senate floor and stomps on it.
Literally stomps on.
Literally stomps on the document. It was this incredible symbolic act. It was the Senate, in a very visceral way, saying, we are done with this. We are not relitigating the Red Scare to block this holiday.
It was a turning point in the debate. But even with the Senate turning so dramatically against Helms, the president at the time, Ronald Reagan, he wasn't exactly enthusiastic, was he?
No, President Reagan was initially opposed to the bill. He cited the cost, primarily, that old argument. But he also had that famous, or perhaps infamous, response when a reporter asked him about Helms's accusations of communism.
Right, he was asked if he agreed with them.
And he said, we'll know in 35 years, won't we?
Which was a reference to when the FBI surveillance tapes on King were scheduled to be unsealed.
Exactly. So he was, at the very least, keeping the door of doubt open. But he was also a pragmatist. The political reality was that the bill had passed the House with a huge margin, and the Senate vote was 78-22. It was veto-proof.
There was no point in fighting it.
He knew he couldn't win that fight. So in November of 1983, in a ceremony in the Rose Garden with Coretta Scott King, he signed it into law.
So after 15 years, it's finally a federal holiday. But signing it into federal law is one thing. Getting all 50 states to actually play ball, that's a whole other deep dive, isn't it?
It really is. Because federal recognition doesn't automatically force states to observe a paid holiday for their own employees. Each state has to pass its own law. And the resistance was fierce and, in some cases, lasted for a very long time.
The Arizona story is probably the most famous one. It's really a lesson in economics over ideology when it comes down to it.
It absolutely is. So the holiday is first observed federally in 1986. But in Arizona, you have a new governor, Evan Mecham, who takes office in 1987. And one of his first acts is to rescind the state holiday that his predecessor had established by executive order. He just canceled it.
And the backlash wasn't just political, it was financial.
Immediate and very, very expensive. The NFL had scheduled the 1993 Super Bowl to be played in Phoenix. It was a huge economic prize. The league and many civil rights groups warned the state that they needed to reinstate the holiday. When the voters of Arizona failed to do that in 1990 referendum,
The NFL didn't bluff.
the NFL didn't bluff. They pulled the Super Bowl and moved it to the Rose Bowl in Pasadena, California.
And we're talking about millions and millions of dollars in tourism, hotels, media coverage, just gone.
Hundreds of millions by some estimates. And you know what? Money talks. The business community was furious. In 1992, the voters were given another chance, and this time they approved the holiday. But it took losing the Super Bowl to make it happen.
And Arizona wasn't the only holdout, right?
Not at all. You had these pockets of resistance that held on for years. New Hampshire is a fascinating case. For years, they celebrated Civil Rights Day on that Monday instead. They didn't officially rename it Martin Luther King Day until 1999.
They were the last state to adopt the name.
The last to adopt the name. But South Carolina was the last state to make it a paid holiday for all state employees. That didn't happen until the year 2000. For years before that, state employees had to choose between celebrating MLK Day or one of several Confederate holidays.
Wow. And Utah also had a different name for it for a while.
They did. Utah called it Human Rights Day until 2000 as well. So it took nearly 2 decades after the federal law was signed for every single state to fully get on board.
Which brings us to today, January 19th, 2026. You'd think by now, 40 years after the first observance, the political fighting over this day would finally be over. We'd all just agree it's a day for service and reflection.
You'd think so. But if you look at our sources for today, specifically what's happening between California and the federal government, the fight hasn't ended. It's just shifted ground.
It has shifted ground, and it's moved into the realm of symbolism and, of all things, public parks. So this year, 2026, the theme coming out of the King Center is Mission Possible 2, building community, uniting a nation the nonviolent way.
That's the official theme. But if you look at the policy decisions being made, uniting seems to be a real struggle.
Let's talk about what we're calling the park wars. This is fascinating. So we have a press release from California Governor Gavin Newsom's office. What is happening with the parks today?
This is a direct and very public clash of philosophies. Governor Newsom has announced that over 200 California state parks are offering free entry today on MLK Day for everyone, and he is framing this explicitly as a counter-move to federal policy.
Because the Trump administration made a change to the national parks' fee-free days, right?
That's right. According to the source material we have, the Trump administration removed Martin Luther King Jr. Day from the list of days where you get free entry into national parks like Yosemite or the Grand Canyon.
Okay, so they removed a day. What did they replace it with?
And this is where it gets really symbolic. They replaced the MLK free day with Donald Trump's birthday, June 14th, which also happens to be Flag Day.
Wow. So MLK Day is out, and Flag Day, which is also the former president's birthday, is in. And Governor Newsom is leaning hard into this contrast.
Yes, the language in the California press release is incredibly sharp. It's not subtle at all. Newsom's office accuses the administration of whitewashing history and of trying to erase civil rights history from the national parks.
And then he has that line. What was it?
The line is, while the Trump administration tries to erase his legacy from our nation's parks, California answers with light.
Answers with light. That is a very strong, very pointed political statement.
It is, and he's backing it up with policy. Not just the free entry, but also promoting California's Re-Examining Our Past initiative, which is a project aimed at telling a more inclusive and sometimes more difficult history within the state park system.
So you really have a tale of two philosophies on display. One that seems to emphasize a specific version of nationalistic Pride Flag Day, and another that emphasizes civil rights and historical reckoning. And the park system, of all things, has become the battlefield.
It's amazing, isn't it, how something as seemingly simple as who gets into a park for free can become a proxy for these massive cultural and political debates.
It really is. But let's zoom out of the high-level politics for a second and look at how people are actually observing the day. Because despite all the political maneuvering, the day is happening. People are out there.
They are. And the local celebrations are where you see that Mission Possible theme of community building actually taking root.
We've got notes here from all over the country. Let's start in Antioch, California. They seem to be taking the day on, not a day off motto very seriously. They're at the skate park.
Right. It's a very tangible form of service. A group of volunteers is out there right now restoring the city skate park. They're removing graffiti. They're doing landscaping. They're cleaning things up. It's not a gala dinner. It's about sweat equity.
It's about improving a public space for the community's kids. I like that.
And at the same time, another group in Antioch is engaging with seniors at a local care facility. So they're hitting multiple generations.
Okay, now let's jump across the country to Yonkers, New York. They're taking a more artistic approach.
They are. They're holding a poetry showcase for students, grades 6 through 12. And the theme is all about justice, courage, and unity. It's about cultivating and hearing that voice in the next generation.
And of course, we can't forget Atlanta.
You can't. It's the mecca of the holiday, the birthplace of Dr. King. The entire city mobilizes. You've got the Atlanta Hawks playing the Milwaukee Bucks in the annual MLK Day NBA game, which is a huge tradition.
And parades, service project.
A big parade out in Lawrenceville in Gwinnett County. And service projects happening everywhere, like at the Browns Mill Community Garden. In Atlanta, it's not just an event, it's a citywide mobilization.
And I saw a note from Governor Whitmer up in Michigan, too, John Conyers' home state. Her proclamation had a statistic that it blew my mind. She noted that between 1957 and 1968, in that 11-year span, Dr. King traveled 6 million miles.
Million miles.
In 11 years, and gave over 2,500 speeches. The sheer physical stamina required to do that before the age of easyJet travel, it just puts the whole day of service idea into a new perspective.
It really does. It's a powerful reminder that the dream was work. It was relentless, grinding labor. It was packing a suitcase, getting on a plane, getting on a bus, standing in front of yet another crowd when you're exhausted. It wasn't just sitting in a room thinking big thoughts.
Speaking of labor and building community, I want to pivot now. We've talked about the fight for the holiday and the politics of the holiday. Now let's talk about the places of the holiday. Because our sources highlight some really interesting stories about how we preserve Black history and build actual community spaces.
And this connects directly back to that California park policy we were just discussing. One of the specific sites highlighted for this free entry day is Colonel Allensworth State Historic Park.
I have to admit, I hadn't heard of this place until we started digging into the research for today. Tell us about Allensworth.
It's a truly fascinating place with an incredible history. It was established in 1908, and it was the first town in the entire state of California that was founded, financed, and governed exclusively by African Americans.
In 1908, that seems incredibly rare and ambitious for that time period.
Extremely. It was an attempt to create a self-sufficient Black utopia in the Central Valley, away from the discrimination of the cities. They have their own school district, their own judicial district, their own voting. For a time, it was a real haven.
And today, it's preserved as a state park.
Yes. And what's really cool is how they're facilitating access to it. It's pretty remote. So Amtrak San Joaquin's, the regional rail line, runs special trains with discounted fares specifically for the park's rededication events in October.
So they're literally building a bridge.
They're physically bridging the gap between urban centers like Oakland and Bakersfield and this vital piece of rural Black history. It's a great example of using public infrastructure to support public history.
Okay, now let's jump back to the East Coast again, to Yonkers. We've got a story about the Nepperhan Community Center. This is a different kind of preservation. This isn't a museum piece. It's a living, breathing community hub.
Right. And the backstory here is really significant. This center is located in the Runyon Heights neighborhood, which is a historic, predominantly Black suburban neighborhood just outside New York City. The center is the heartbeat of that community, but it had fallen into disrepair and needed a major renovation.
And usually that story ends with a long, drawn-out process of trying to get a government grant or raising local taxes. But they did something different here.
They did. We called it the twist in our notes. The renovation is being funded entirely by a private developer, a company called Oseram North America, through something called a Community Benefits Agreement.
For those of us who don't spend our time reading city planning documents, break that down. What is a Community Benefits Agreement?
It's essentially a contract. A developer wants to build a big new project in the area, in this case some residential towers. The community says, okay, we will support your project and not oppose it, but in return, you need to give something tangible back to the neighborhood.
And in this case, the give back was renovating the community center.
Exactly. The developer's funding the entire renovation, so it costs the taxpayers of Yonkers $0.
$0. It's a very modern example of a corporate community partnership. using private capital to support a public good.
It is. Now, you could debate the pros and cons of relying on private developers for public services, but in this specific case, it's being celebrated as a huge pragmatic win. It's getting the doors open and the lights back on.
And then let's go back to Antioch one more time because they have a literal symbol of unity that's being restored, the Unity Bell Tower.
This is a really lovely grassroots effort. The Antioch Historical Society raised over $100,000 from the community to restore this incredible 1871 bell that came from the city's first congregational church.
And why is this particular bell so special? Is it just because it's old?
It's not just its age, it's about who heard it ring. In the 1870s, this church was, for its time, radically inclusive. So that bell rang for the city's founders, sure, but the historical records show it also rang for the Chinese laborers who were building the levees, a group often excluded from civic life.
Okay.
And it also rang for a man named Thomas Gaines, who was the city's first documented black resident. He was a freedman who came to Antioch and started a business. This bell called all of them.
So it's a witness to the city's earliest diversity.
Exactly. That's why they're framing it as a unity bell. It's a physical artifact that symbolizes that beloved community that Dr. King spoke about, but dating all the way back to the 19th century.
I love that. It's a physical touchstone for a very high-minded ideal. But, and here's the pivot, because we promised to get into the gritty reality. Preserving a bell is one thing. It's a project. It has a start and a finish. Raising $100,000 is hard, but you do it, you build the tower, you have a dedication ceremony, and you're done.
Right. It's a project with a finish line.
But running a city, dealing with the actual ongoing problems that Dr. King fought against, poverty, homelessness, basic human needs, that is a never-ending. And that brings us to Section 4, the grit of governance. We're going to zoom in on Antioch, California, not just for their skate park or their bell, but because their recent city council agenda gives us a perfect snapshot of what happens when ideals meet reality.
This is where the rubber meets the road. If you want to see the real state of the beloved community in 2026, don't look at the parade floats. Look at the debate over a warming center.
So set the scene for us. It's January. It can get cold even in California. And Antioch, like many cities, has a significant homeless population.
The stats from the local paper, the Antioch Herald, are pretty stark. According to the last official count, Antioch has about 11.6% of the entire county's unsheltered population. That's 246 individuals.
And we know those counts are almost certainly an undercount.
Always an undercount. And to their credit, the city has been spending on this issue. Since 2021, they've spent over $16 million trying to address homelessness through various programs.
$16 million. That is not a small amount of money for a mid-sized city like Antioch.
It's a very significant investment. But the immediate crisis right now is the cold. The National Weather Service has a specific criteria. When the temperature is forecast to drop below 32 degrees Fahrenheit for 3 consecutive days, that triggers the need for a warming center, a place where people can go so they don't freeze to death.
And the Antioch City Council is debating 3 options for how to provide this. And this debate just perfectly illustrates the constraints and the tough choices of local government.
It really does. Okay, option 1 is simple. Rely on the county. The county has a program for this. The problem.
Let me guess. There's no guaranteed location in Antioch.
You got it. The county might open a center in Concord or Walnut Creek, which are miles away. So you're basically telling your most vulnerable residents, good luck, hope you can find a bus to another city in freezing weather. It's politically risky and, frankly, dangerous.
Not exactly the beloved community approach. So what's option 2?
Option 2, partner with faith-based groups. Churches, community halls. The city provides some support cots, maybe some funding, but the organizations do the heavy lifting of staffing and running it. It's more sustainable, but it requires a lot of coordination. You have to find willing partners who are ready to open their doors all night on short notice.
Okay, and option 3?
Option 3, the city just does it themselves. They fund and run their own warming center.
Which sounds like the most direct, most responsible solution. Just do it.
It is, but then you look at the cost. The city staff report estimates it would cost between $3,500 and $4,500 per night.
Wait, $4,500 a night? Why is it so high?
Because they don't have dedicated staff for this. The city would have to pay overtime. You'd need police officers for security, public works staff for maintenance and setup, administrative staff to manage it. It's all overtime pay, which is incredibly expensive.
So if you have a cold snap that lasts for a week, you're looking at over $30,000 in unbudgeted expenses.
Instantly. And this is where the ideal of we must help the poor crashes headfirst into the reality of we have a looming budget deficit.
Let's talk about that budget, because I saw a headline in the local paper about Antioch having a surplus, right? But I feel like there is always a headline about a surplus that turns out to be not quite what it seems.
I'd call it the surplus illusion. It's very common in municipal finance. The headline says Antioch has a $9 million surplus. Sounds like
Yeah.
great news, right? But when you dig into these spreadsheets, as we love to do, you see that after you account for funds that are already committed or carried over from previous projects, the real available unallocated surplus is only about $3.8 million.
Okay, but $3.8 million is still black ink. Why the panic over a $30,000 warming center bill?
Because you can't just look at this year. You have to look at the forecast. And the city's own financial forecast for next year shows a $6.5 million deficit looming.
Ouch.
It's a structural deficit. So if you're a council member, you are looking at a warming center that burns through cash, a surplus that's much smaller than it looks, and a massive deficit right around the corner. Do you spend that money tonight to keep people warm, knowing it might force you to make painful cuts to libraries or parks or road repair next year?
That is a brutal calculus. That is the real hard work of governance. It's easy to give a speech about compassion. It's incredibly hard to vote for it when you know the money isn't there in the long term.
And it gets even messier, because it's not just about the big life and death numbers. The friction in local government also happens over the small numbers, when politics and personalities get involved.
You're talking about the grant controversy.
The grant controversy. This is such a classic local government drama. You have a public rift between the mayor, Ron Bernal, and the city manager, Bessie Scott. And it's all over a relatively small pot of money, $60,000 in economic development grants.
60,000 in a city budget that runs into the hundreds of millions.
Exactly. But look at the friction it causes. A selection panel awarded two main grants of $27,500 each to two organizations, Delta Business Group and Prison from the Inside Out. Good programs. But they gave a much smaller grant, just $5,000, to a different group, the Celebrate Antioch Foundation.
And let me guess, there's a political angle to the Celebrate Antioch Foundation.
Of course there is. It's run by Joy Motz, a former council member who is seen as a political rival to some on the current council. So the mayor publicly challenged this small allocation. He wanted the city council to review it and potentially change it.
And the city management pushed back.
Pushed back hard. She cited a recent county grand jury report that had basically told the Antioch City Council to stop meddling in administrative duties. She argued that the panel made its decision and the council's job was to approve it, not relitigate it.
So you have a power struggle between the mayor and the city manager, a grand jury report being thrown around, and a delay in funding for community groups, all over a $5,000 grant.
And that is the takeaway. It shows how even in local government, navigating personalities and these small sums of money can cause significant friction and dysfunction. It delays progress. It consumes time and energy that could be spent trying to solve the warming center problem or the budget deficit.
It's a powerful reminder that governance isn't an abstract concept. It's done by humans, with all their egos and personal histories and rivalries.
Precisely. It is messy, difficult work.
Before we wrap up, I want to take one slight detour. We've been talking about MLK Day as this established, fixed thing on the calendar, even with all the political fighting. But our research threw up a really interesting parallel from history about how holidays evolve. We assume the calendar is set in stone, but it's really not.
No, it's not at all. And the example of Thanksgiving is perfect here. We found this note about what was known as the Franksgiving incident.
Franksgiving. I love that name. What happened?
So it's 1939. The country is still in the grips of the Great Depression. Retailers are desperate, and they go to President Franklin D. Roosevelt with a request. Thanksgiving that year was set to fall on November 30th, leaving a very short Christmas shopping season. So they asked him to move it.
Just move Thanksgiving.
Just move it up 1 week
Yeah.
by presidential proclamation to extend the shopping season and boost the economy. And he did it.
And I assume everyone just went along with it.
Absolutely not. Chaos ensued. 32 states agreed with FDR and moved their holiday. But 16 states, mostly Republican-led, refused. They called it an affront to tradition. So for 2 years, 1939 and 1940, the United States effectively had two Thanksgivings.
You're kidding. Depending on which state you were in, Thanksgiving was on a different day.
Depending on the state. Colorado might be eating turkey 1 week, and your relatives over the border in Texas were celebrating the next. It completely messed up football schedules, family reunions, school calendars. It was a mess.
That is wild.
It wasn't until 1941 that Congress finally stepped in and passed a law fixing the date for everyone as the fourth Thursday in November.
So just like with MLK Day, where you had Arizona holding out for years and New Hampshire changing the name and now this ongoing fight over the national parks, the standardization of how and when we celebrate our national values is often a messy, political, decades-long process.
It is. A holiday isn't just a date on a calendar that appears out of thin air. It's a consensus. And building consensus is hard, contentious work.
So let's try to synthesize all of this. We started this deep dive with John Conyers introducing a bill 4 days after an assassination. We saw documents being stomped on in the U.S. Senate. We've seen how, in 2026, that same fight has moved to whether you can get into a national park for free or if you have to go to a state park instead.
We've seen volunteers out painting skate parks in Antioch and kids reading their own poetry in Yonkers. We've seen the symbolism of the Unity Bell and the pragmatism of the developer-funded community center.
And then we saw the spreadsheets, the $16 million spent on homelessness, and the agonizing night-by-night debate over whether a city can afford to keep its most vulnerable citizens from freezing.
It's the full spectrum, the dream and the reality, the poetry and the spreadsheets.
So here's the final thought we want to leave you with today. Dr. King traveled 6 million miles to spread a message of service and community. Today, we see that service codified in our laws, in free park entry, and volunteer days. We have, in many ways, built monuments to the idea of the beloved community.
But the question our sources today seem to be asking is, where does that community actually live?
Exactly. Is the true measure of a beloved community found in our monuments and our federal holidays and our inspiring proclamations? Or is it found in the quiet, difficult, often unglamorous line items of a municipal budget that determine who stays warm tonight?
That's the question.
Something to think about on your day off or your day on. Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive.